So everyone in the audience, if you could please raise your hands if you have seen this map before. Maybe not this exact image, but something similar. Great, I see most people in the audience have their hands raised, which is exactly what I would expect. And now raise your hand if you've seen this map of the world. A lot fewer people have their hands raised. Again, that is exactly what I would expect. So I'm going to put these two maps side by side, and I'd love for you to just take a few seconds to look at them and reflect on the key differences between the two. So the first and the most obvious difference is that on these maps, the size and the location of our continents is wildly different. Mercator's map makes it seem like, for example, Africa and Greenland are the same size, whereas Gall's and Peters' map, if we're to believe that map, makes it seem as though Africa is maybe 14, 15 times greater than Greenland. Once again, if we're to believe Mercator, who was a German map maker who actually drew this map first in 1569, if we believe him, then we might think Germany is in the center of the world. It's centered both vertically and horizontally. But if instead we believe Gall and Peters, then we would think perhaps Germany is in the northernmost quarter of the planet and not the center of the Earth. And actually, we should believe Gall and Peters because they actually designed this map to accurately represent the size of land masses on our planet. Mercator, on the other hand, designed his map to help European colonial powers navigate the oceans. So I wanted to bring this up to you because I think it's a really important example of how bias impacts the maps that we interact with every day. I remember the first time that I learned this lesson and that I realized that my mental map of the world was very, very wrong. See, growing up, I took Mercator's map for granted because it was ubiquitous. It still is today in our classrooms, public spaces, and online spaces. So my mind was truly blown when I learned that Gall and Peters' map was much more accurate. But see, bias doesn't just show up on what is portrayed in our maps, it also shows up in what's left out of maps. So I want to go back to 2012 and have you come on this journey with me. I had just graduated from college and I joined the Peace Corps as a public health volunteer. I moved to Guinea, which is a West African country, and after 2 months of intensive training, the Peace Corps dropped me off in my host village. It was a small, rural village in the middle of the country. Now, Peace Corps could be incredibly challenging at times. It could be isolating and even heartbreaking. But I was able to not just survive in Peace Corps, but to thrive thanks to the women pictured here. They represent multiple generations of strong, independent women who took me under their wing. And over time, they transformed from my host family to real family. I ended up loving living in Guinea and managing public health projects there, so much so that I plan to stay and extend my service past the normal 2 years. So you can imagine I was pretty devastated in August of 2014 when my fellow volunteers and I had to be evacuated because of the increasing risk of the Ebola epidemic. So there I was in the fall of 2014, back living in my parents' house and reading headline after headline about how the Ebola epidemic was worsening in West Africa. I felt desperate to find a way to aid in the response. So I started researching. I reached out to my network and my connections, and that's when I was first introduced to the OpenStreetMap project. You can think of OpenStreetMap as the Wikipedia of world maps. It is a free, editable map of the world. Anyone can edit it. You can, your mom can, your neighbor down the street. And it's a public good, meaning we all own it. It's not owned by a single corporation or entity. So OpenStreetMap was important in the Ebola response because organizations like the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders needed access to up-to-date digital geographic information in order to provide medical services to villages in West Africa or to conduct contact tracing. But the problem was there was no accurate digital geographic information of many of these places. So in the US, we're really lucky. We have great geographic data right at our fingertips on our phones. I'm sure many of you used a routing application on your phone to arrive at this event tonight. We take it for granted. But Google Maps is so great in the US because it has an incentive, and that is profit. Companies in the US pay Google so they can advertise on the Google Maps platform. We as consumers have the dollars to spend with those companies. So Google's going to keep maintaining and building its amazing map. That's certainly not the case in Guinea, and that's where a project like OpenStreetMap is so important. Just a few days ago, I took this screenshot. This is where my host village should be on Google Maps. There is a main road, that yellow line going through the middle of the screen, a few paths that are the white lines. But if you took this map to be true, you would think that nothing really exists here, that no one lives here. Thankfully, we have OpenStreetMap, and you can see that actually there are a lot of buildings in this village. People live and work here and build their lives here. And the reason my host village is mapped on OpenStreetMap is because, well, I first mapped it back in 2014 for the Ebola response, but since then, many more people have built on the work that I started, and we've all contributed to make OpenStreetMap a better map of the world. And I predict that this map of my host village will only continue to improve as the years go on. So I want to talk a little bit more about OpenStreetMap. Another thing I've learned about it is that it's really a community of communities. We have craft mappers who are dedicated to creating the best, most detailed map of their neighborhood that they can. We have hordes of humanitarian mappers who mobilize to map areas of the world that are particularly vulnerable to natural disasters or to public health crises, for example. And if you think OpenStreetMap is just kind of a niche nerd project, think again. I guarantee all of you have seen it and used it because it's used by many of our top corporations. Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, even Craigslist use OpenStreetMap. Many of them even pay employees whose primary job is to edit the map. We also have youth mappers, and I'm extremely fortunate to work for this organization. We are a consortium of university students, researchers, and educators around the world who are passionate about using geographic data to identify and advocate for changes to social and environmental issues in our communities. We're currently nearing 300 chapters, and we're in 63 countries worldwide. And I'll tell you, it is the joy of my life to be able to work with youth and see how they use their geospatial technology skills and their awareness of digital platforms to highlight issues in their community, like mismanagement of waste sites or inequitable access to health clinics. They use maps to highlight those issues and to advocate for change, and it's truly amazing to see. And I'm the program director of Everywhere She Maps, which is our gender-focused program. And so through that program, we're especially focused on increasing women's participation in our network, empowering more women to be leaders in their geospatial industry and in their communities. And so for all that OpenStreetMap, though, has done to democratize data and access to data, there are still issues. It would be really naive to think that OpenStreetMap and even youth mappers could exist outside of current power structures and societal and cultural norms that are in the world. So there's a phenomenon, it's known as Conway's Law. It can be interpreted a lot of ways, but one of my favorite ways I recently saw is that technology will reinforce existing power structures and inequality. This plays out in a lot of ways. For example, 2 times more men than women work in the geospatial technology industry. On top of that, only 22% of geospatial executives are women. We know that women from a young age are less likely to be encouraged to pursue educations in STEM and to continue to seek careers in STEM and to remain in those fields throughout their lives. There are a lot of reasons why women are less, there are a lot of reasons why women don't participate in STEM and in the geospatial industry as much as men do. But I will say it's not because of a lack of interest on women's part, because we've learned through Everywhere She Maps that women are more likely to become involved in the geospatial industry when there are specific programs that are designed to intentionally recruit and include and welcome them. And we know this because we are really proud to say, that actually 40% of Youth Mappers students are women. We know we have a lot of work to do to get to 50%, but this is a great sign that there are things that we can do to increase diversity in the geospatial industry and in technology more broadly. And I want to highlight a story of a particular youth mapper to show how important this is and to show this program in action. So I want you to meet Natalia da Silveira Arruda. She's currently a PhD candidate at Arizona State University. And before that, she was a professor living in Medellin, Colombia. She also serves as a Youth Mappers Everywhere She Maps regional ambassador. Now, when Natalia was living in Medellin, she led a team that wanted to map the physical cycling infrastructure of the city. They wanted to help people optimize their cycling routes, and so they put their geospatial skills to work and created this map. But what was really important is that they didn't stop there. Natalia and her team also wanted to understand cyclists' motivation and their perceptions and their reasons for cycling in certain areas or not. And they looked at this data and they surveyed cyclists through a variety of lenses, but the most important was gender, because they found that women were severely limiting their mobility around the city for a few reasons. There were many areas of the city that women perceived to be unsafe for cycling. These are high traffic roads. Women preferred to stick to bike lanes. And that's because they had less confidence in their cycling abilities and they thought they were less experienced than men, even when objectively they had been cycling longer than men or more frequently. And so what Natalia and her team uncovered by using this gender lens is that there were many areas of the city that women just weren't accessing on their bikes, and they created this really powerful map showing these perceptions. So you can see the red areas on the map are where cyclists perceived, women cyclists perceived the city to be unsafe for them. And the purple areas are where they did feel comfortable biking. And so they were able to highlight this issue of limited women's mobility around the city and call attention to it and advocate for safer spaces for women within the cycling community of Medellin. So I really love this story. I think it's an amazing example of an empowered woman empowering other women. Natalia used her leadership skills and her vision and her geospatial knowledge and command of geospatial digital tools to bring attention to this issue that was disproportionately impacting women. So I want you now to think back to Mercator's map. And we learned that he was German, so again, not surprising that he put Germany in the middle of his map. I think it is time for women to have more of a say in what is mapped in our world and what we are able to see in terms of the data that we access. Men historically have long dominated the field of geography, and it's time to make it more equitable and more diverse. So I have a few ways I want to invite you to join me in this work. First, encourage, mentor, sponsor a girl or a young woman who has expressed interest in a STEM career. Help her access the networking and the resources and the education she might need in order to pursue that career. I also invite you to learn more about OpenStreetMap. Like I said before, it's something we can all edit, and I would love for you to add your perspective to the map as well. And finally, I challenge you next time you look at a map to think critically and ask yourself, who mapped this and why? And I have dedicated my efforts to ensuring that the geography field becomes more diverse and that any young woman who wants to make a difference in her community using data has access to the resources and the skills and has the confidence in order to do so. And that is why I believe in Everywhere She Maps. Thank you.